Well, good morning, everyone. Happy Monday morning to you. Welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I'm the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. We are continuing our study of the Olivet Discourse. We've been focused on Matthew 25:31 and following, and trying to show the wider context of the prophecy to show that there's simply no way in this world it could be referring to some end of time, end of the Christian age event. So we're going to get back into Daniel chapter 12 because, as I've shared with you, we have Daniel chapter 12, the time of the judgment, the time of the resurrection, which everyone agrees is Matthew 25:31. And then we're going to be going to Revelation chapter 11, 15 and following. I have to tell you, I believe that this correlation and this conflation between Daniel 12, Matthew 25, and Revelation 11, I think is absolutely definitive. I don't see how anyone can argue with it. But before I get to that, last week I made an announcement about some bad news, some really bad news for our ministry, and that is that this office in which I'm currently sitting, and we have 9 rooms here for my office space, and that's inventory, that's mostly library, to be honest about it, and we've been here for 16 years. I think that's exactly right. Anyway, we've been here a good long while, and our rent has been ridiculously cheap. I won't go into details on that, but let's just say in the rest of Ardmore, you couldn't rent one room, 12 by 12, for what we have paid for every month for the last 16 years, and it included utilities. Okay, so we're losing this. The building has sold, and the new owners are going to turn this entire building into a what he calls a boutique hotel. Well, we already know, number one, we don't want offices in a hotel. Number two, they've already let us know that the rent is going to go through the ceiling. So it's nothing that we can afford. And so this is creating a tremendous financial burden on our ministry. So I made an appeal to you, my listeners and viewers, last week to help us during this critical time. I asked that perhaps 300 or 400 out of my 12, all of my thousands, literally, of subscribers be able to support us for $10, $15, $20, $25 a month. Now, we certainly haven't gotten anywhere near that kind of a response, but I just want to say thank you, and thank you so very, very much to those of you who have been able so far to be able to pledge a monthly support or even a one-time pledge, a one-time gift to our ministry. We've had a couple of one-time gifts that have been extremely helpful, and we are by no means over the hump. I'm not going to say that, but I do want to say how much my wife and I appreciate your help during this critical time. It's almost beyond words for us to express properly our appreciation to you, our viewers, for helping out in this very, very critical time. We're still gathering our estimates to build on our property. The cost is unbelievable. We would far rather invest in that, and thank the good Lord, our house is paid off. So we're going to have to get a home equity loan. And look, I'm not griping, I'm not whining. I'm just simply saying what's got to take place here for us to continue doing what we're currently doing. So we're going to have to. We have a 24 by 24 building there, and it's full of car parts. Lots and lots of car parts. I've begun thinning them out. But anyway, we're going to have to go in there, turn it into office space, and then add an additional 24 by 28 to it in order and turn it all into office satisfactory type of a building. And needless to say, very expensive. Very, very expensive. But it is what it is. But we do need your help at this time. So let me say one more time, thank you so very much to those of you who have been able to pledge, to give. If it's one time, thank you so very much. To those of you who have been pledging $10, $15, $25 a month, thank you. Thank you so very much. To those of you who are still thinking about that, hopefully you can still do that in the very near future. But thank you from the bottom of our heart to those of you who are able to support us. And listen, I can't say this without saying a hearty thank you to our regular, faithful supporters who support us every single month. It means so very, very much to us. It truly does. Okay, last week we began an investigation of the parallels between Daniel chapter 12 and Matthew chapter 25, 31 and following. Now remember, Daniel chapter 12, verse 2, the time of the resurrection. Matthew chapter 25, 31. I don't know of anyone that denies that Matthew chapter 25, 31 is the time of the resurrection. So they're parallel. Even though Matthew chapter 25, 31 does not use the word resurrection, and it doesn't talk about coming out of the dust of the earth, etc., it's the time of the resurrection, and everyone agrees with that. Well, last week, I shared with you how many commentators, even some former preterists, argue that, okay, you have Daniel chapter 12, verse 1. At that time, there shall be great tribulation, such as has never been since there was a nation. And we are told, well, at that time must refer to the time of Antiochus Epiphanes. I'm not going to go back over the territory, okay? I do want to reiterate this morning a point that is absolutely critical to understand. And this is a bit of repetition. I understand that. But I really, really, really want to drive the point home. Because when you make the argument for then, that is the time of Antiochus Epiphanes, when you make the argument that that is the time of the great tribulation, that Daniel says, at that time Michael shall stand up, the great prince who stands watch over the sons of your people. There shall be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation, even to that time. And you say, oh, that's the time of Antiochus Epiphanes. Well, I have said this before. Let me say this again. And again, ladies and gentlemen, this is the view of Mr. Kyle Pope in his book, Thinking About AD 70. It is the position of John Collins, who recently did an interview on YouTube ridiculing my views. The host held up my book, The Elements Shall Melt with Fervent Heat. And so the host and John Collins both ridiculed my views. John Collins takes the position, at that time must refer to the time of Antiochus Epiphanes. Well, if you're going to take the position that at that time is the time of the Great Tribulation, then you must be able to prove, pardon me, that the tribulation, and yes, there was tribulation, but you must be able to prove that the tribulation at the time of Antiochus Epiphanes was greater than the tribulation at the time of the destruction of Jerusalem in BC 586. Now, concerning the tribulation of 586 BC, we are told it was a tribulation such as never been. Ezekiel chapter 5. So, if you're going to argue that Daniel 12 is Antiochus Epiphanes, then you've got to be able to correlate that with BC 586. Well, somebody says, well, this is kind of metaphoric language, etc., etc. Well, okay, but you still have to deal with the facts. And here are the facts, ladies and gentlemen. In 586 BC, the Babylonians, the Chaldeans, came in. They utterly destroyed the city of Jerusalem. They came in. They utterly destroyed the Solomonic temple. That destruction was total destruction. Now, keep in mind that Daniel chapter 9, which, by the way, John Collins says was also a prediction of the time of Antiochus Epiphanes. Well, wait a minute. Daniel chapter 9 says that in the destruction being foretold, the city and the sanctuary, i.e. the temple, would be destroyed. Well, as Brent Petrie in his book, Jesus, the Tribulation and the End of Exile says, the, quote, Achilles heel, unquote, of the view that Daniel 9 is talking about the time of Antiochus Epiphanes is the very language of Daniel chapter 9. Daniel 9 says the city and the temple would be destroyed. But ladies and gentlemen, you must catch the power of this. The city of Jerusalem was not destroyed in the time of Antiochus Epiphanes. Was it captured? Yes. Was it desecrated? Yes. Was it leveled? No. Furthermore, was the temple destroyed in the time of Antiochus Epiphanes, 174 BC to 165 BC? Was the temple leveled? Totally destroyed? No. Was it desecrated by the offering of a pig on the altar? Yes. But ladies and gentlemen, desecration, defilement, is not destruction. And Daniel 9 demands, Daniel 12 demands an abomination, not only an abomination, but the tribulation. How did Daniel express it? There shall be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation. Well, 586, you must catch this. 586 was exponentially greater, exponentially worse than what happened under Antiochus Epiphanes. Judea was carried off captive into Babylon in 586 BC. Did anything remotely resembling that happen under Antiochus Epiphanes? No, it did not. So when you compare the two events, 586 BC with Antiochus Epiphanes, 165 BC, there is no one-to-one comparison, and furthermore, there is no, oh my goodness, look, the time of Antiochus Epiphanes was far greater than that under Nebuchadnezzar. No, there is nothing like that. Unless you can prove that the desecration, not the destruction, unless you can prove that the defilement, not the destruction, of the city and the temple in the time of Antiochus Epiphanes, unless you can prove that it was greater than the actual destruction of the city and the temple in BC 586, then you cannot argue that what happened in the time of Antiochus Epiphanes is what Daniel was told about in Daniel. But you can say that Daniel was actually predicting the great tribulation that Jesus did foretell in Matthew 24:21. At the time of the setting up of the abomination of desolation in Judea in the first century, after all, Jesus said his apostles would see it. Jesus said, "For then shall be great tribulation, such has never been, nor ever yet shall be." Jesus' description matches that of Daniel chapter 12. And furthermore, Jesus said to his apostles, living apostles, when you see the abomination of desolation, then flee. That's let you flee. So, let me reiterate what I said last Thursday. If Jesus was not predicting what Daniel predicted, if Daniel was not predicting what Jesus was talking about, then number one, the apostles could not see it, but they were supposed to see what Daniel talked about. And when they would see it, they would flee it. But if Daniel was not predicting what the apostles would see, then they were not going to flee what Jesus said they would see. Got that? I hope you can see, ladies and gentlemen, Daniel 12 is not talking about the time of Antiochus Epiphanes. It is talking about Jesus' prediction in Matthew chapter 24, which he said would take place in his generation. And guess what? John, in Revelation, I am your brother in the tribulation. The tribulation. And I'm out of time. Let me recommend to you that you go to my website, donkpreston.com, BibleProphecy.com, and that you order my book, The Resurrection of Daniel 12, verse 2, Fulfilled or Future. In this book, I have an extensive discussion of whether or not Daniel was written during the time of, or predicted the time of Antiochus Epiphanes. I cover all of that material, what I've shared with you this morning, and more as well. Okay, we got more from Daniel chapter 12, correlating it with Matthew chapter 25, and I'll see you on the flip side.